Now pay attention, 007. Goldfinger is the classic Bond film, but is it all it's cracked up to be? Let's find out. To start the review, let's look at the story and Bond's mission. James Bond is tasked with finding out the scoop on Goldfinger, a man who has been smuggling gold between countries and making money illegally from doing this. Bond catches up with Goldfinger, who seems to immediately know who Bond is and is aware of the threat, and he wants Bond to stop snooping around. However, that's never stopped Bond before, and Bond pursues him all the way to Austria to find out exactly what Goldfinger's doing. Goldfinger at first seems to be a little bit of a small-time crook, so making money from doing things illegally. However, we learn that his big plan is to detonate a bomb, a dirty bomb, so a bit of a nuclear/radioactive bomb in Fort Knox, therefore polluting all of the gold of America and making his own gold supply worth so much more. It's actually a really good scheme. It's a really good plot twist. You don't really see that one coming. You think he is just a kind of a small-time crook. And you're on this ride along with Bond, who's discovering all this stuff for himself. Goldfinger takes a bit more of a comedy approach to James Bond, and it actually lays the way for a lot of Bond films to follow, where you have a kind of almost a little bit of a spoof, a tongue-in-cheek element to Bond. Bond doesn't really seem to take the mission that seriously in this one. He's having a bit of joke around. In fact, the first time we meet Goldfinger, Bond is winding him up a little bit via a funny little walkie-talkie kind of device, and he's spoiling Goldfinger's day. He's winding him up a little bit, and he's flirting with his missus, which obviously doesn't go down very well because she is later painted in gold, and Bond is sent a very clear message from Goldfinger's henchman, Oddjob. As far as the story and the plot's concerned, this is quite a good one. I think Bond has a big impact on the story. His presence there is obviously a nuisance to Goldfinger, who just wants to, make more money and carry out his plot, and Bond's always there as a kind of a thorn in his side, which I think works really, really well. Sean Connery is at his best in this one. I think he's really, really good. He almost outdoes, or perhaps does outdo, what he did in From Russia With Love, in that he inserts a bit more of a light-hearted attitude to this one. There's a little bit more humor in it. There's a little bit more awareness of what's going on. And I really like it. I think, obviously, in Goldfinger, this is kind of one of the earlier Bonds. So the things that we now think of as cliche and as tropes were all new in this one, which really does complement the film. The fact that Sean Connery can be really suave, he can be really witty. He's just perfect as Bond in this one, and even his relationship with M in this one, he's testing it, he's pushing it a bit. He's lost a little bit of that respect that he had in the previous two films, and you can see he's pushing his buttons. He knows how to wind M up and making little jokes about how to drink things in a certain way and so on, and how to spot a good or a bad brandy or a bourbon. It's really, really nice, and you can see M getting frustrated with Bond, and it's lovely to see that chemistry start between these two characters. The Bond girls in this are really interesting. We have a couple of girls at the start, one of them who is painted gold and ends up dying that way, which is obviously an incredible way to go out. And she was basically close with Goldfinger, and this is her punishment for betraying him and letting Bond get close, is her death, which is pretty incredible. And then we meet her sister, Tilly, who is out for revenge, and she wants to kill Goldfinger. And at first we're tricked into thinking that she's trying to kill Bond. Is she a bad guy? But she's not. She is just there to kill Goldfinger, the man who killed her sister. And then she dies, and it's very sudden, it's very frightening, and all of a sudden Bond realizes that he's caused the death of these two people, these two sisters, and it's quite big, it's quite bold, and it does make the film have a bit of a serious undertone, to be fair, despite all the jokiness that's going on. Whilst getting close to Goldfinger, Bond also meets Pussy Galore, a iconic character for many reasons, and she is in this to help Goldfinger. Goldfinger's basically recruited her and her team, the Flying Circus, to carry out what is an assault on Fort Knox, and her job is to fly over Fort Knox and through her aeroplanes release a gas that's going to knock everybody out within the vicinity. Speaking of Pussy Galore, she's an important character because she is Bond's way to disrupt Goldfinger's plan. His original idea is to send a message via somebody, another agent who's come to check up on Bond and check up on Goldfinger. And he slips this man a message, but then this man actually goes on to be killed by Oddjob. And that's a really nice twist because it really makes Bond have to think on his feet. the message he sent back about Goldfinger's plot, he sent it back to London. It never got there because this man was killed. And in an act of desperation, Bond really does force himself in many ways on Pussy Galore to try and convert her to his side. And it does actually work. Watching it now in 2026, I can see that people would have issue with this, and I think actually it's a little bit awkward to watch it. However, I feel that the reason that Bond really does force himself onto Pussy Galore and take advantage of her quite a lot, it's him being desperate. He's a weak character. He's shown his weakness. He's showing his flaws. And I think, again, this is a guy who's desperate to complete the mission. He's not necessarily wanting to have relations with Pussy Galore, I don't think. I think he really is acting desperately. And although that doesn't excuse the way that he does force himself upon her in what people would say is a very questionable scene, I think, again, as with From Russia with Love, this is just Sean Connery really leaning into the flaws of Bond. This is a man who isn't perfect. He isn't the perfect secret agent. And the fact that he does this sort of stuff to try and, you know, get this mission complete just shows that he is a little bit of a questionable character. I think as far as the story goes, this is quite a good one. It's got a lot of twists, it's got a lot of turns, there's a lot of excitement in there. The Dawn Raid on Fort Knox is fantastic as a climax. You have a climactic battle where Bond faces off against Goldfinger's henchman Oddjob, which is really exciting. It's not as exciting as the fight in From Russia with Love with Grant, but it is, you know, memorable. It's got a lot going on, and the way that the Oddjob actually dies via his own hat getting electrocuted is quite exciting. The same with Goldfinger, his death, getting sucked out of the aeroplane. It's a lot of fun, and it also calls back to a line that Sean Connery delivered earlier, which I believe is fantastic. When he originally meets Pussy Galore and she asks if he's going to have any trouble, he basically replies saying, look, if we fire a gun in here, I'm going to get sucked out of this aeroplane, and that's the last way that I want to arrive in America. I just want to do it the proper way. I really loved that. It's a really nice touch from Bond, and I think, yeah, it's a nice callback at the end to Bond actually implying that if you fire a weapon in an aeroplane, you're going to get sucked out of it. The story is also good because it gives Bond a chance to do some actual spy stuff. He gets to infiltrate bases, you have him eavesdropping on conversations, you have him snooping around Goldfinger's base and figuring out the plot for himself. These are things that weren't massively in the previous two. Not to say that the previous two weren't good. From Russia with Love is potentially my favourite Bond film of all time now. But it's nice to see Bond being a spy, being a secret agent. This is the Bond that we know today in 2026. There's a lot of comedy elements in this film, and they weren't really there in From Russia with Love or from Dr. No. There was obviously a few jokey lines and a little bit of wit coming into those films, but in this we have full-on comedy sequences, like, you know, off the top of my head, the grandma who mans the kind of gate to the compound. She's there with a machine gun, and you can see her rattling this machine gun and wobbling around. It's obviously played for comedy, and I think this is straight comedy, and this is obviously something that continues on into the Bond films. They all have an element of comedy to them, but I believe that this is probably the turning point where the producers were, it's a case of, let's just lean into the funny stuff. Let us have a laugh at things. Let us laugh with Bond. Let's enjoy this adventure a little bit more. And for me, the thing I really liked about From Russia with Love is that it was actually a really serious story, and there were a few jokes and a few witty comments in there from Bond, but the story itself was played very seriously. In Goldfinger, it's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of things in here that have been thrown in for the sake of comedy. And I can't talk about Goldfinger without talking about the fantastic laser sequence. It's in everybody's memory. Everybody knows the dialogue from this scene, whether you're a Bond fan or not. And watching it back now, it's just done really well. It's extremely tense. I imagine watching this for the first time, you don't know how Bond's going to get out of this situation. And to see him use the skills, he's eavesdropped on a conversation, he's picked up a few words and he pulls it out at that moment. You're there with him, you're desperate. Is this going to work? Is this going to save him, or is this not going to save him? It's a really, really nice scene, and I can see why it's just gone down in history, because it really is fantastic. It's really well done. It's really well directed. It's really well shot, and that soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. To conclude, I think the story is really, really solid here. I don't think it hits the heights of From Russia with Love, but there's a lot of fun in here. It's a lot more lighthearted, which, whether you like it or not, it does lend itself to the Bond formula, and it did set the way for a lot of what's to come. I'm going to have to give this one a 4 out of 5. This brings us on to villains and henchmen. Who is Bond up against? The title character, Goldfinger. He's a really interesting character. He's played a little bit more, I would say, humorous compared to the previous two films. Dr. No was played very straight. He was a very serious bad guy. And in From Russia with Love, we obviously had Blofeld and Rosa Klebb to an extent as the main villains, and they were all played really seriously. These were really dark, scary people. When we introduced to Goldfinger, he's dressed in, funny holiday attire. Almost he's outside in his gold pajamas. It's very much Dr. Evil, gold member kind of thing. And we see him playing a game of cards in which Bond is foiling his attempts to win and to rip off this guy and to cheat. And Goldfinger's made to look like a bit of an idiot. He's played as a bit of a bit of an oaf, a bit of a buffoon kind of in that opening scene. And we do see him come into his own towards the end of the film when he's actually captured Bond and he knows who Bond is. He has this edge of him where he's serious and he's like, I know I can kill you anytime I want, Mr. Bond, tread carefully. He does go into that and start that whole evil villain kind of thing, which we know really well from Bond history. And I think it's nice to see Goldfinger really pave the way for what villains are to come. I think the fact that he's played for laughs a little bit in the opening scene does actually knock him down, in my estimation, as a Bond villain. He's obviously very iconic, and he has a really interesting scheme, a really good evil plot, and he does toy with Bond a lot. However, I think that he doesn't hit the heights of Dr. No or some of the other villains that are to come in the series, and for that he doesn't get top marks from me. But I think when we look at his henchmen, we have Oddjob, who is clearly very iconic. He's gone on to inspire lots of other henchmen. He is the quintessential Bond henchman. However, I think that although he has the menace and he has the look and the gait, and he obviously throws his hat, which again, it's a really cool thing, but I do find it to lean on more humorous than scary. I never found that anybody who watched Oddjob throwing his hat would think, wow, that's a scary character. I think they think, oh, that's a little bit funny, that's quirky. I think even the end fight with him, he doesn't have the weight that Grant had in From Russia with Love. He isn't scary. He doesn't feel like he's an equal to Bond. He's just kind of pushing Bond around. And you know when you're almost waiting for Bond to take out this guy, he's not really a massive threat, despite being, pretty stacked. He's pretty strong. He crushes a golf ball, which I've never tried to do, but I guess it's probably pretty difficult. And he is an on-screen menace towards Bond, and he is there to back up Goldfinger, but he never really hits the heights of actually being a threat to Bond. However, as far as he's quite iconic, and Goldfinger's quite iconic, and I think them two together, it's going to have to be a 4 out of 5, just because it's not as good as some of the villains, but they are really iconic and they're memorable and they stand out on their own, definitely, as far as what makes them unique and what makes them different in the rest of the series. So yeah, a 4 out of 5 for villains and henchmen. This brings us on to gadgets and Spycraft. Now this is where Goldfinger really does level up quite a lot, and it's iconic for a reason. I'm not going to get to the car yet, but this has our first proper gadget scene with Q. You have Bond visiting Q in his lab. You've got all sorts of different things going on around, different crazy devices, explosions going off, all sorts of things on the show here in this one. It's really nice to see it. This is the first time we've seen all this stuff, and Q really comes into his own as a character in this. You feel that, he is a guy who's passionate about his work, as he always says, and that he finds Bond to be a little bit of a pain, which is nice. It's nice to see a little bit of banter in this one. We didn't get that in previous one. But to get onto the gadgets, the main one we have here is obviously the car. This is where we were introduced to Bond's iconic Aston Martin DB5 with all the bells and whistles. Ejector seats. Bond is like, are you joking? And I think he's representing what we as the audience think when you watch that for the first time. Like, are you joking? There's an ejector seat in a car. How cool is that? And the best thing about Goldfinger is that all of these gadgets, every single thing in the car, from the things that come out the wheels to the smoke to the bullet screen to the ejector seat, it's all used in the film. We see it all pay off. So you're given all these gadgets up front in Q's lab, and you see them all used throughout the film, to fight bad guys, to defend Bond, to get Bond out of a sticky situation by launching some guy through the roof, and even to just, knock a woman off the road so you can interrogate her and find out what's going on. They're all there, and they're all used, and they're all critical to the plot. And I just think that this film is absolutely iconic. There's a few films later on in the series where Bond is shown loads of gadgets and he's teased, what about this? We've got this, you've got this, you've got this. And you never actually see any of them in use. They just sort of hinted at, which is a massive disappointment. And I think this film just absolutely knocked it out of the park. It gets everything right. The gadgets are fantastic. The car is absolutely fantastic. I cannot think of a better Bond car, and I can't think of a film where the gadgets have been put to better use. While I'm talking about gadgets, I also need to mention the production design. We have some fantastic sets in this. Notably for me is Goldfinger's base, where he presses a button, everything turns, you know, you've got like a pool table that turns into a communication desk, you've got a huge map comes out on the wall, the blinds come down and everybody's locked in, and what seems to be a country club kind of turns into a kind of a military bunker, and it's fantastic. I don't know what came out first, Stingray, Thunderbirds or Goldfinger, but they're all very similar, and I can see the inspiration. They've all inspired each other, and I just love that sort of stuff. It's absolutely fantastic here. So for me, this one has got to be a 5 out of 5. The only gadget that I think is a little bit daft and really leans into the comedy element, and if you want to call it a gadget, is the hat with the seagull attached to the top of it. What the hell's that all about? Next up, we have location and world building. Where does Bond go? So in this one, he starts off in London. He works his way over to Austria, where Goldfinger's based, and he ends up over in the USA, where he has the whole Fort Knox sequence. I think it's quite nice. It's, for me, a lot of it looks like England. So I don't know whether they filmed a lot in England or whether they actually went to America. I haven't actually found out. But a lot of it looks very familiar. That, you know, the golf club scene, the base in Austria, it does look like it's, you know, I think it's probably just a backlot in Pinewood Studios or something. And the same as Fort Knox. You never actually see any of the American countryside. You just see kind of Goldfinger's ranch, and you see Fort Knox, which just is a little unassuming building. It doesn't really take you there. There's not a lot of setting up the locations in this one. The only bit that's quite notable for me is Miami in the opening scenes, where you have this really long, nice, I was going to say drone shot, but a long, nice helicopter shot where you see the whole of Miami Beach, and then it zooms in and it ends really nicely with a guy jumping off the diving board. It's a really nice cut to the scene. A lot of that scene is actually green screen as well, I noticed. So, you know, I don't know whether Sean Connery was actually out there in Miami or not. It's all nice, but I don't think there's that kind of escapism with this one. I don't watch the film and then when I came out at the end of it think, oh, I really want to go traveling to Austria, or I really want to go traveling to America, to Fort Knox, wherever the hell that is. When I watched Dr. No, or I watched From Russia with Love, I wanted to go to the Caribbean. I know that's a little bit different to Austria, but I wanted to go to the Caribbean, and I wanted to go on the Orient Express and just experience all these crazy places that Bond had been. I wanted to go and see the Bosphorus. I felt like I was there with Bond on these adventures. And I think Goldfinger, the locations don't really do that to me. It feels a little bit more grounded, even more grounded than From Russia with Love was, in that I can kind of feel like, yeah, I've kind of potentially been to some of these locations before, and they don't feel that crazy. They're not that luxurious. And there aren't those big establishing shots either in this one. Apart from that Miami sequence, it's all quite grounded. You know, we know where he is because he says he's here, but you don't really see him traveling so much in this one. It is very much just focused very much on that story, which again is not a bad thing, but it's not. It doesn't really do it for me in location wise in this one. I think if I'm seeing Austria, I want to see mountains and all that sort of stuff, but you actually just see a little bit of woodland and some kind of buildings in the middle of nowhere. It could kind of be anywhere. The only bit that really stuck out for me, again apart from the Miami bit, is the car stuff. So when he first arrives, it says he arrives in Geneva. I've been to Geneva. I don't think he's anywhere near Geneva, but you have him driving through these hillsides and the music's just luxurious. The DB5 looks fantastic, and you have him cruising through these mountains and all that. That's the only bit that I would really think of this film. Yeah, location wise, it's good. It shows off where he is. But apart from that, this is quite an average one. I think I'm going to have to give this one for location a 3 out of 5. This brings us on to music and sound. For music, it's 5 out of 5. I don't know what else to say. I suppose I should say more about it. I absolutely love the soundtrack to Goldfinger. If you'd asked me about which is my favourite Bond soundtrack, Goldfinger's never up there. It's never in my top. The theme tune I really hold with high regard, although I don't listen to it a lot. I always think of it as, you know, it's the classic Bond theme. You've got Shirley Bassey belting it out. And to just watch it properly, imagine seeing that for the first time at the cinema, it must have been absolutely incredible because it is such a powerful song. And John Barry's score there in the background is fantastic. But genuinely, throughout this film, even though I know the music so well, I've got it on CD, I've got the original CD, I've got the remastered CD, I've got it on LP, I've got the original LP, I've got the new La La Land expanded LP. So I have 4 versions of this soundtrack, and I know it so well. I haven't watched this film for a while. Watching it, I was getting goosebumps at the music in scenes that I wasn't really aware of having music. So, for example, I always used to love the dawn raid on Fort Knox. It's really epic. It ramps up the tension. It's such a good scene when you see that, you know, the shot of the airplanes on the runway ready to go, and the music starts to kick in, and it loops, and the loop just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just an explosive. It's as powerful as something like, you know, the end montage of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It has that kind of, wow, this is epic. What's going on now is epic, and it really does raise the scene. It just lifts it to another level, that end scene. But when I was watching it for this review, the bits that captured me were his arrival in Geneva when he's driving around the countryside, as I just referenced when I was talking about locations. And he leans on the Goldfinger theme in this score more than he leans on the Bond theme. And in From Russia With Love, he leant on the Bond theme a lot, and I actually pointed that out in my review, that I thought he did it a little bit too much potentially. In this one, it's done absolutely perfectly. He weaves in the Goldfinger theme throughout the score in many different ways, picking out different motifs from it, and it's just iconic. It works so well. And the other scene that I thought was fantastic, which I believe on the score it's called Oddjob's Pressing Engagement, is the track that accompanies Oddjob taking this MI6 guy out for a ride, killing them, crushing the car up, and then bringing it back. It's just epic. The music is just fantastic. It is perfect film scoring. It's got Oddjob's theme in there, you've got the Goldfinger theme in there, you've got a little bit of Bond in there, and at the same time, while doing all that, it complements everything, every twist and every turn that's been taken on screen. It's all there complemented by this absolutely fantastic cue. And I just can't praise the score enough. As you can tell, I could make a video. In fact, I'll make a video about the Goldfinger score, because it's so good. It is perfect for me. It's absolutely perfect. And I watched the film, and then the following day I was editing a video for work, and I was just listening to the score constantly in the background. I ended up just sitting, just replaying these scenes in my head. And I feel like the Goldfinger score is one that you can listen to outside of the film, but you can never imagine anything other than the film when you're listening to it. You can't listen to it without thinking about Oddjob. You can't listen to it without thinking about the planes flying over Fort Knox. And that, for me, is a sign of a good score. It's cemented into the film's DNA. As far as the sound's concerned, it's really good, really functional. There's nothing crazy going on. There's no weird sound effects or anything. It's all very good. There's a little bit of dubbing, I think. I know that Goldfinger's lines were mainly dubbed, but it's actually done really well. I've got no problem with that. I think just solid presentation audio-wise, and I think this is absolutely fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed watching this film and listening to the music, and that theme tune and that score, it's all just done absolutely perfectly, and I think this has got to be a 5 out of 5. The next part of the review is action and stunts. What do we have going on here? In this one, we see a lot of the car. A lot of the stunts are based around the car. We have a little bit of a chase in Austria with Bond and Tilly Masterson when he's following the Goldfinger and Oddjob in their car. It's not so much an action scene, but we do get to see the DB5 using some of its gadgets. We then have another action scene with the car in Austria at night time, where we have Bond having a bit of a chase. We have a lot going on there, and it is quite exciting, especially Bond getting out of the situation where he's got the bad guy sitting with him with the gun, and he uses the ejector seat to fire him out, and then he drives really fast, and we've got all sorts of stuff going on. We've got guys leaning out the car blasting with guns trying to shoot Bond. We have Bond using all of his gadgets, his smoke screens and everything. It's a really, really cool, pretty high octane action scene, and it ends with Bond actually crashing the DB5, which I thought was really good. You're not expecting it. You're expecting him to, press a button and something else happens. And the fact that he crashes into a wall and wakes up in the laser sequence is fantastic. It's really, really good. It's really nail-biting, and it just catches you off guard a little bit. I think the laser sequence is absolutely fantastic. I've mentioned that in this review already. But as far as a stunt sequence or an action sequence, it doesn't really fall into those categories. But for me, I have to mention it there. It is one of the big set pieces of Goldfinger. We also have the dawn raid on Fort Knox, which I thought was fantastic. Not just the whole thing of seeing Goldfinger's plan come together, the planes flying over and all that, but we also see Goldfinger's troops going up against the US Army. You have a big gunfight, lots of people getting thrown over railings and falling to their death and all that kind of thing. You have the big fight with Oddjob and Bond, which is a good one, but as I've said, I don't think it has the weight of Grant versus Bond on the Orient Express. For me, that was absolutely fantastic. I was on the edge of my seat watching that one, even though I knew the outcome. With this one, Oddjob's a little bit slower, he's a little bit clunky. It doesn't have the same kind of weight to it, and there's not the same urgency. I didn't feel at any point that Oddjob and Bond were kind of an equal match and who was going to come out on top. You're kind of just waiting for Bond to kill this guy somehow. And then the very end scene where you have Goldfinger, a little bit of a fight in the aeroplane, and then he gets sucked out the window. It's cool. It's not massively memorable. I don't think there's anything special. It's kind of a nice way for Goldfinger to go out because it's a callback to what Bond mentioned earlier when he was in the plane previously. But I think Goldfinger could have had a much better death than this one. I think he could have died something to do with gold, perhaps, you know, a gold brick, or perhaps he had so much gold he got crushed by it, or something like that would have been a little bit more impactful, and a nice witty line from Bond would have been really good as well. We didn't actually get that, so it felt a little bit underwhelming, I think. But as far as stunts and action scenes overall, this film really, for me, is all about the car. It's all I can think about now. I know there's lots of other things like the pre-title sequence and stuff where we have explosions going off and all that, people getting electrocuted and a couple of puns being dropped. But for me, this film really is all about the car and about the laser sequence, and I think they're pretty good. They're really well done. They're really exciting. They're not up there with the excitement of From Russia with Love. There aren't crazy stunts where you're watching something thinking, how on earth did they pull that off? It's not to that level yet, but what's there is quite exciting. It's quite engaging. And I think for that, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Now for my favorite, Bond legacy points. I gave Dr. No and From Russia with Love 5 out of 5 for this, and when I was watching Goldfinger I was thinking I can't give another one 5 out of 5, but hear me out. Goldfinger is a classic for many, many reasons, and I think when people think of James Bond, one of the first words that comes to their mind is Goldfinger and Connery, and this is for a reason. This really is iconic. Although I think Dr. No and to some extent From Russia with Love really paved the way for what was to come and to set some of the guidelines for what a Bond film is, Goldfinger really does set the standard for what a Bond film is. And I think because of the comedy elements, because of the over-the-top set pieces, because of the gadgets, because of the way Sean Connery is with the witty lines and, you know, the kind of always having a sense of humor despite everything that's going on, I can see why people call back to this one as the quintessential Bond film. 100%. It did just pave the way. There's so many things that we have in here. He looks absolutely fantastic throughout. His suit is fantastic. The way that he dresses, the way that he conducts himself is fantastic. The villains are, again, not my favorite, but iconic. They're really well done. They paved the way for what's to come. Bond girls, you have a really strong Bond girl in Pussy Galore. Even in Tilly Masterson, for a short period of time she's on screen, she really is integral to the plot and she plays it really well, and you feel that she's a really good character. And I think she's really, really memorable, and her death is tragic. Goldfinger himself, as I've said, and Henchman Oddjob, he just sets the standard for what all of the henchmen going forward are going to be measured against. For this film as well, I felt I could feel the danger. There's one bit where there's a car at night time and he drives up really, really close to the camera and stops, and you can see that the car missed his line and he actually came so close to stopping in front of the camera that, you know, they must have been inches away from actually knocking the cameraman over. And you can feel that energy in the film when you're watching it. You can feel that this is dangerous to make. And every single penny of the budget is there on screen. They didn't do anything by halves. The whole Oddjob getting rid of the guy by killing them and then taking the car to get it mashed and then putting it back on the car and bringing it back. It didn't need to be. Oddjob could have just gone and shot this guy and that's the end of the story. But no, they put in these bits that are really big and really memorable, and every bit of budget is on screen. The end scene is huge. The dawn raid on Fort Knox feels absolutely massive. All the locations, the production design, again, it just sets the standard of what is to be expected of a Bond bad guy's bits. These big, over-the-top, crazy places that you never see in real life. You never see, you know, walls that transform from one thing to another, and trapdoors and all this sort of stuff. This really does just set the standard for what you expect in a Bond film. And I can't, again, as I said this with From Russia with Love, I can't give this any less than 5 out of 5 for Bond legacy points, because it really does just set the standard of what a Bond film is. You've got a clear structure, you've got a really good story, you've got a really strong Bond in Connery, you've got very memorable villains, you've got a memorable henchman, you've got really memorable side characters, supporting characters, pussy galore, you've got Bond girls, you've got lots of memorable action scenes with the car, with Bond on his own, the laser scene. It's just all iconic, and it did set the standard. I know I've said this, I sound like a broken record, I said this about the last two, but it does just set what a Bond film is. And if you want to know what an actual Bond film is all about and what all the ingredients are, just dissect Goldfinger, because it's all there. Everything there is Bond. There's nothing in this film that belongs in anything other than a Bond film, and I have to give this a 5 out of 5. So what does this mean for Goldfinger? What does this get out of 10? How does it stack up compared to the others so far? This, out of a possible 35 points, received 29, which means that Goldfinger is an 8.3 out of 10, which is an incredibly strong Bond film. This, for me, is revered. It's looked upon as a classic Bond film, and watching it again now, I can see why. I still do prefer From Russia with Love. I think that's the highest score that I'm potentially going to give to a Bond film. I absolutely loved that one. But for me, Goldfinger is almost as good. I wasn't sure which one was going to come out on top. After reviewing them both, I do think that From Russia with Love is a little bit better. For me personally, I think it's just more grounded. There's a better story going on there, and it feels like a classic spy espionage film. But Goldfinger is almost more of a classic Bond film. Everything's here, all the ingredients work together really well, and more importantly, the things that we now take as almost cheesy or cliche or expected in a Bond film, they're all new in this, they're all fresh, and therefore looking at it from that perspective, it's absolutely fantastic. It's really innovative, and it just sets the standard of everything that's to come in a Bond film. But what do you think? What's your favourite Bond film? What do you think about Goldfinger? Do you prefer Goldfinger or From Russia with Love? Where do you think Goldfinger sits against some of the better films in your opinion? So things like The Spy Who Loved Me, Live and Let Die, GoldenEye, Casino Royale, The Living Daylights. There's so many other Bond films. Where does Goldfinger sit for you? I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this review down in the comments. Is there anything I missed out? Is there anything I didn't get right? Or did I look and praise this one too much? Is it not worth the praise? Is it overrated? Or, well, it's not overrated, I know that for a fact, but do you think it's overrated? Or do you think it's worth all the praise that it always gets? Is this the quintessential Bond film? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you're interested in more of these things, please do give this video a like and subscribe, and I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. And I'll see you on the next one, because James Bond will return.